even Republicans that follow this, who are hawks against Iran, have just said clearly that this deal is a loss. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, we'll be reading it later, saying, are you kidding me? Is this it? Is this really why Donald Trump took us to war? Because this is a disaster. The president keeps talking about it, how we're going to end Iran's nuclear program, Mika. This deal, as people recognize, does not do that. And if you punt the ball, the Iranians will never do a deal. So suddenly Donald Trump, if he did this deal, would find himself in a position far weaker than Barack Obama ever was. That's data. That's not opinion. That's data. And if somebody says fake news to that, well, that person's lying, and they reveal themselves as a liar, because we're talking about data. We're talking about numbers. We're talking about the fact that we're in a worse position if we make this deal than we were before the war on nukes, and we're in a worse position on this deal on the Strait. And just very quickly, again, I'm not saying that. Lindsey Graham, who was the chief proponent, the chief cheerleader for this war, is saying that. Ted Cruz is saying that. The chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, is saying that. The Wall Street Journal editorial page is saying that. And yes, in a very ominous sign, the hardliners on the far right in Iran, who have taken over the government, are saying that as well. This is a deal that would be a complete and total surrender for the United States of America. And again, I've always said Iran can't have nukes. I have always said that. The president has said that, and 7 United States presidents have said that. Iran cannot have nukes. This deal will allow them to keep nukes, and it will allow them, according to them, to continue making money off the Straits and be in a better position economically and politically after the war than they were before the war. That seems like a losing proposition. And Democrats and Republicans, other than poor Mike Johnson, my God, how sad, what a sad political existence to have to go along with the president on every single bad thing that's done. Mike Johnson, I think, is one of the few Republicans saying this is a good idea. It is not, according to Republicans, Democrats, the Wall Street Journal editorial page. And I got to say also, Netanyahu, who continues to level Lebanon. The war against Lebanon and everybody in the region goes on unabated, and he's putting his foot on the gas, which means he's going to kill more civilians. There's already been 3,600 civilians killed in this short blitz to Lebanon, 3,600 people. It's going to continue. He says it's going to get tougher because this man on the left, and we have said it here every day because it's true, whether you can deal with the truth or not, it's the truth. Benjamin Netanyahu will continue fighting wars because if he stops fighting wars, he will have to face justice at home, and that will not be pretty. And he then at some point will have to answer for, look, this is a guy right here that was responsible for Hamas being funded in a way that allowed them to kill Israelis on October 7th. He went to Qatar. He sent his Mossad agents to Qatar 3 weeks before the attacks. And Qatar said, do you want us to continue funding Hamas? They go, of course we do. Of course we do. So he funded Hamas through Qatar, which, again, a group that he said is a terrorist group his entire political life. And then when they attacked, no response from Israel. In some cases for 10, 11, 12, 13 hours. And he's going to have to answer that. Why am I bringing that up now? I'm bringing that up now because we've been saying for years that he will continue fighting wars and continue killing people as long as he can. Because when the killing stops, the justice begins for Benjamin Netanyahu, and he does not want that to happen.
So you've laid out a lot of dynamics here as to how and why this war in Iran is happening and how it's going. And even what Roger Wicker and Lindsey Graham and a lot of Republican lawmakers are now saying, or what concerns they might have. And hardworking Americans may not have time to follow every detail like that. But this weekend, they saw it at the gas pump, filling up their cars, paying sometimes over $100 to fill up their trucks, like they can't afford this war from their perspective. This war is costing hard-working Americans a lot of money. And there's not a lot of understanding as to, number one, how it's going, and number two, the why. Given the outcome, and David Ignatius, given the outcome right now, it seems the one thing that's very consistent is that Iran is proving itself to be what anybody who has any knowledge in this field would have predicted, an enemy unlike anything Donald Trump has dealt with before, an enemy that has a mind of its own and doesn't care about what Donald Trump says they should do.
You know, Mika, Trump was convinced in the early hours, days of this war that Iran would capitulate. He hit them with overwhelming force. He was coming off a quick, easy victory in Venezuela, and he thought these guys will cave. You know, this won't take long. The United States is so powerful, and they have resisted. They have taken a beating. Nobody should be confused about how much damage has been done to the Iranian military and to parts of its nuclear weapons program. But they're still standing, and Trump doesn't have a good answer for how to deal with that. He's got an idea that, in a kind of romantic way almost, is attractive. He says to Iran, let's help you become a more modern country. Let's help you move out of this era of revolution and confrontation. He even was saying over the weekend, let's have you join the Abraham Accords and be with Israel, which was, you know, it's wonderful to think about that, but it's so unrealistic that it just is completely separate from the reality of this conflict right now. So, as I said earlier, Trump is really at a dead end. He's in a military morass. He's at a strategic dead end. His effort to get out of this for the moment, and let's wait and see what today's events bring, has not brought the memorandum of understanding. He's got the top negotiators in Doha, in Qatar, from Iran, so it's possible that by the end of the day we'll see something different. But this is a measure of just how badly the strategy that the White House and Israel planned has gone.
We've just really laid out here, and wasn't planned, but what I talked about how Donald Trump has said, and every other president said, Iran can't have nukes. So you have that reality here that Donald Trump is moving towards, said he wants to move towards. But this deal won't do that. This deal will kick the can down the road and nothing will ever happen. Iran will not give up their nukes. And then you talked about gas prices. Right. And so the president really is in this catch-22. Does he end the war and help Americans on gas prices? Or does he leave an Iran that still has nukes, that has more power of the Strait than before the war, and that will be more ominous, more dangerous, and more of a threat to the Gulf allies that told the president not to get into this war at the beginning? So it is a catch-22, and the question is whether Americans are going to have to put up with that short-term gain for the president to figure out what he's going to have to do to make sure that the Iranians will never have a nuclear weapon that they can threaten the United States with. And right now, he's stuck in the middle of that, and the Iranians are not giving him an off-ramp.
I think it was supposed to be short, right? That was 2 weeks or something like that.
And here's the thing. I've got to say this, Mika. Idiots have been knocking idiots, and they're just idiots. Have been going around talking about pointy-headed bureaucrats, and maybe that was George Wallace, but they sure sounded like it during the Trump campaign. Talking about experts. Everybody's saying experts aren't. So much of the MAGA movement is fueled by hatred of experts. Well, let me tell you what experts told everybody about Iran. Don't go. Don't go into Iran, because if you go into Iran, they'll cut off the strait immediately. Your father said it 15 years ago. People have been saying it since the early 1980s. You can't do it because they'll cut off the strait. And yet they did it anyway. So the so-called experts were warning them. David Ignatius, every day on this show, leading up to the war, what did he say? Mr. President, with all due respect, sir, Iran is not Venezuela.
No.
I mean, I told him on the phone, Iran is not Venezuela. Yeah. Don't listen to Lindsey Graham. Don't do it. Iran is not Venezuela. But he thought it was. Experts told him he wasn't. If he had talked to anybody on the Iran desk in the CIA, they would have said, no, this is a nightmare. You will get entangled in a quagmire there. Don't go. And so yeah, you know, experts, sometimes, actually, you need to pick up the phone and call one or two of them because they will stop you from getting involved in what Bob Kagan, an expert, says could be one of the greatest military defeats in the past century.